So we are officially live as far as our recording is concerned. Again, welcome to the SIETAR India webinar. I'm going to hand it over to Mala now, who will introduce our presenter. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jill. Warm welcome to everyone from Mumbai, and warm welcome to you, Deepa.
Thank you, Mala.
It's a pleasure to have you here today. And let me introduce Deepa. Deepa Soman is the founder and managing director of Lumiere Business Solutions, a company she founded in 1996. Lumiere works with Indian and global clients across various industry sectors and partners with them in designing and creating strategic business solutions based on consumer insights and an understanding of the cultural context. Deepa calls herself an accidental entrepreneur. I'm sure this is an accident she does not regret, going by how well Lumiere is doing. She also describes herself as a learner, optimist, and sharer. And we couldn't resist the temptation of taking her up on the sharer bit. So today we have Deepa to share with us two case studies on how cultural contexts provide the broad landscape by which to read and interpret the mindset, attitudes, and needs of internal and external stakeholders. And importantly, how these insights are leveraged to drive effective business solutions. So Deepa has two case studies for us. I think in the first case, the study is based in Nepal. The cultural context is Nepal. And the second one, I won't reveal until we get there. But before we get into the case study, Deepa, I'd really love that if you can share with our audience how you got interested in the intercultural aspects of doing business.
Thank you, Mala. Thank you, Sunita, and thank you, Jill, for this opportunity. And I'm grateful for this chance to speak and learn. And I think a big part of preparing for any talk is also about going back and reflecting, and that whole experience of putting something together itself was a journey in itself. My interest in culture actually started early as a student of sociology, as one of my early subjects. And I think just a lot of curiosity about people, Mala, a lot of interest in the differences and the similarities. So I think the first excursion to the northeast of India, early as a 16-year-old going on a college excursion, getting exposed to parts of our own country that were so beautiful, so different, and so complete in themselves. And I think that appreciation on how much one can gain and enrich and expand, so to say, by merely observing, going behind what is really the stories, what are the myths, where do these cultural practices come from. So I remember we were in this Khasi village in Shillong, in Meghalaya, and we were witnessing a wedding, and to understand the rituals of what's happening over there, it was just so mesmerizing. So that was really the aspect which tells you that there are these differences, and then there is this underlying humanity of ours. In research and in our work, which is about helping organizations become consumer-centric so that they can really build brands, businesses, and solutions around needs of consumers, is also about getting really authentic about wanting to understand the lives of your consumers. And one could actually go back and sort of, it was all coming together, Mala. So the business part, the personal interest, all of that sort of came together. The other part was, again, the whole organizational aspect. There was again this excursion, and we went to Pune to study the Tata, at that time, the telco campus. And, we spent the whole day there interacting, looking at the manufacturing, looking at, the employees. And this whole aspect of organizational culture, Mala, again fascinates me, because a lot of what organizations will become in terms of being able to attain their purpose and live up to the promise of the vision really comes from being able to understand the aspirations of the employees in building in building a workplace that is engaging, that's cohesive, that allows and fulfills different functions to work well. And there again we got a lot of opportunities, Mala, to work in the space of organizational transformation. And the
Wow.
whole situation understanding is really to understand the as is, where are we right now? And that's again about dialoguing with people, trying to understand different perspectives of, what makes certain functions work in a certain way, particularly when it's a matrix organization. Where do people come from? And there again,
Right.
it's about people, it's about dialogue, listening. So I see it all as very interconnected, and a long answer to your question, but it's all about my life work of many years of doing this. So the business of culture is really at the bedrock, I can say, of doing anything which involves people.
Right.
And when I learned about SIETAR, and there's something that, an organization that works in this space of intercultural relations itself is new to me. And I'm so curious to learn as and share. So
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think the subject of culture and this cultural understanding and going into the deeper part and understanding the why is an absolutely fascinating journey once you get started on it. And exactly like you said, there's so much cultural differences that we come across in business. In There's no avoiding that. And the more we try to learn this and use this, is it's a win-win for everybody. Great. Thanks so much for sharing this, Deepash. We could get started on your first case study. I know that this one you have named it Nepal Harmonization. And this case study is about a multinational company with a very long presence in Nepal, and how they used cultural understanding and insights to groom local talent, improve employee engagement, and move the business forward to achieve its potential. We can't wait to hear about it. So I'll over to you,
so
Deepa.
I'm going to share my screen now. So I'm just going to present. So this is really the context. There's this large global multinational present in many, many countries and present in Nepal for over 25 years. And somewhere an understanding and an appreciation that while they've been around for those many years, the business hasn't grown to its full potential. There were there is a context to this. All the senior leadership are of Indian origin, and the managing director, when he spoke with us, the first ask, he spoke very strongly and deeply about the organization's intent to groom Nepali talent. So the context here is, you have the Indian parent, you have the, which is the larger organization, you have the HR function in the Indian organization, and there is this ask to work in Nepal to understand where we are right now and how might we be able to align or work closely with the leadership, with the managing director, to work in the space of transformation. Uh, we also noticed that Nepali institutes, educational institutes, value this employer greatly. And there was a global engagement survey that was done across the various countries of this organization, and it showed that there is an opportunity to build greater understanding and higher engagement. So we did three different projects over the 2018 and 19 period, and I'll tell you all a little bit about how we went about it. So I must give you a context that since 2016, end of 2016, Lumiere, we discovered the Gallup framework. So those of you who've joined in from North America know Gallup, I'm sure the pollsters, and the Gallup strengths methodology worked really well for us. I've been trained in leadership coaching, but not the Gallup methodology. But my partner and my husband Milind, who also works with me, is a Gallup coach, and we had seen the starting point of being able to help understand the individual being a good place to start. So when we put together the proposal, we proposed to use this approach, which was accepted and appreciated. And the starting point was from being able to assess the first lot of participants who are going to be in our workshops, in which, and the ask was really to try and understand, to sort of almost build a whole blueprint for for Nepal, for the organization, which was rooted in the cultural ethos and not an overlay of the global or the Indian counterpart. So it was really about bringing that. So we onboarded the HR team on the strengths journey. They came in a little later because there was, this is also something which we observed, that people were doing shorter stints in their respective roles. So our job was first to observe where they were, and then to work with them through a couple of workshops that we did together of co-creating solutions. So it was a fairly structured approach that we took. We understood what were the business issues through a lot of stakeholder conversations that we had. We learned that we tried to understand what were the perspectives, and where the differences sort of lay. And in a sense, it's really trying to understand what's driving people, how are they perceiving their team members, how do they see, how has the needle moved for them when they have, after they've come into the work uh, in this setting. So we knew that it would have to be a phased approach, and it was going to mean taking a lot of people together. And remember, we were going to be there for a period of time, come back, and then we continued to engage and interact. So, the challenge areas that we identified put out certain spaces that we would have to work with. One was, how do we build a learning culture? The second being, what's the specific climate at this point in time, and wherein, can we improve it? There was a sense of a lot of stress. There was a whole bunch of people that were feeling very threatened about losing their jobs. There were challenges experienced with respect to respect for the individual. Again, there was the line manager, and there was the team, and there was this whole sort of a tenuous link, and there was an apprehension to speak up. Team building was again a challenge that we needed to work on. And how do we create accountability and ownership? And there was this overall piece which was going to become an outcome of, how does the employer branding benefit from all of this? So there was also that eye on the prize of saying, how is this going to help us eventually in terms of attracting good talent and making sure that we keep up and being, how do we get good buzz? How do we get people talking about the organization favorably? How do they experience a genuine positive change in the culture?
I see. In your work with this company, where did you see the national culture playing a role in all of this?
National culture was a very important part, because the parent believes that while there is the organizational culture, there is a huge amount of import given to being able to align with the national culture. Because Mala, it's the employees' culture the ability to understand that is the first starting point to being able to be consumer connected with that country. So once we get a clue into connecting with the way people live, what are their challenges, what are their concerns, what keeps them awake at night, what are their aspirations for the future, it's you kind of extrapolate that, and then you understand your market, you understand the country in which you're going to be selling your brands, isn't it? So to that extent, there is no running away from this whole aspect of consumer and customer centricity if you genuinely want to be innovative and grow. I'll take you to the next slide, Mala. This is very interesting because when if for people who go from India to Nepal, there is a perception that maybe these are very similar. Just the physical proximity, even the languages, there is a certain, there's a closeness in the languages as well, Hindi and Nepali to an extent. But the countries are also very different in character. We must remember that Nepal is landlocked, never been ruled, never been, overthrown, ruled by a monarchy, didn't have access to education until the 50s because education was not permitted for people. I mean, it was only allowed for public in the 50s, after the 50s. So there's a lag. Education is a lag measure. Also, it's a feminine society, and there is, when I now speak from I'm borrowing from a framework here when I talk about using the hospitality just to explain, because many people will appreciate it. It's also about family. It's about liking what you do, and it's a little different from a more masculine society. And the organization culture, the global organization culture, was also fairly masculine. So here, the focus of the Nepali is more working to live, incentives like free time, being able to close the day at a certain point in time, not long hours. Nepalis wake up fairly early in the morning. They like to be home in the evening and have dinner with the family. So there was this, this whole notion, this whole difference. Whereas you had people who are expatriates, who had, whose families were away, who would work long hours, and somewhere there was a sense of judgment that there is a tendency to shirk work among the locals. There were, people had sort of formed these pretty hard positions on where they were and where the other was. So the me versus other was fairly, seeming quite entrenched. And one realizes that it's, you can't do these things and move away and think everything is going to be hunky dory. It's all about a continuous working at it. There is a need to sort of keep handing the baton to the next bunch of leaders who will come in, and to make sure that there is the continuity of intent with new leadership, as well as if there's a new leader, you need to have that as, first of all, an overarching job to be done, saying how do we make sure that this is, people don't see this as a rocking chair or just being on a treadmill, but a genuine path towards positive change, to understanding, and towards being able to fulfill those aspirations of the leadership that you're going to induct from within Nepal. And I must tell you all one very interesting thing that happened in one of the early, maybe the second interventions. We knew that there was a need to build strong role models. And we said, we need to look for someone in Nepal who's a Nepali, who has achieved success, material success, business success, has worked in a global setting. And what we did was, we invited this person to to do a talk on one of our sessions, and it was very inspiring for him to talk about ownership, about responsibility, about being able to take things to closure, things that, about leading from the front, about being able to, uh, go through the vicissitudes or the hardships, because he talked about his job, which involved traveling the country. He talked about, his challenges of building and working in his organization, all of which resonated very well. And I think he was speaking the same language as
Right.
what the man, and he was sort of underscoring the same values of accountability, uh, he spoke of trust and transparency and honesty and integrity and everything which sort of made a lot of sense. And he came from a space not of entitlement but of genuine gratitude for the opportunity that he had got to work with this organization, which gave him exposure to different places in the world where he had worked and served. So I'm happy to say that the individual who we invited, it also served as a nice turning point, because you can relate. And
Right.
there's nothing, Mala, that works as well as a story, as someone who's a living example of, epitomizing the values that you want to drive. So I think that worked really well.
Right, true, true. You spoke about these differences in the dimension, the masculinity and the femininity, and work to live and live to work, and some of the perceptions around it. Was there any work done on the area of, bridging this and, changing the perception, getting into the wise dialogues, at the individual level,
Yeah.
at the senior team leadership level, just to understand where they were coming from, to have this respect for each other's, whys?
Yeah. Yeah. So, Mala, this is also something one learns, that this morning I had the opportunity of speaking with uh, one of a very, very senior mediator, a mediator who
Yes,
works in the space. I don't know whether you attended, of advocate
partly.
Sri Ram Panchu. And one of the things that, the more I do work in this space, I realize that spaces like coaching, mediation, these are all very closely interrelated, because all of this stems from a very fundamental need to understand the other person's point of view. And the way you can do it is first by being able to make the space to observe, to listen, and to dialogue. Because in the whole, the whole pressure of delivering numbers, there is a certain dehumanization that could happen in interactions. Nobody is doing it deliberately, but you might, and this happens to all of us. We might not be at our at our compassionate best, or at our generous best, or we are not sensitive to somebody's sniffling or somebody's coughing or somebody's, and we are very quick to be exceedingly task focused and miss out on the human aspect. So I think somewhere the need to sensitize that a genuinely caring or a compassionate culture also is about small interactions where there is an opportunity to come across as authentic, come across as genuinely concerned, and just being able to pay attention to those little things. So when Advocate Panchu was saying that when you are mediating with different cultures, a lot of times you may inadvertently make mistakes. So therefore, to even proactively ask, to say, so for example, if I were to hand over a cup of tea to you, I might do it with my right hand. So in India, if I were to do it with my left hand, it would be a rude thing to do, because the left hand is not seen to be as pure as the right hand is. So therefore, if you were doing anything which is is giving, you would do it with your right hand. Now, something like this, if would you would expect it to be common knowledge, but it need not be common knowledge if I'm from another culture.
Right.
In Nepal, giving something with one hand is rude. It has to be given with both hands. So if I hand over a cup, I do it with it being resting my left hand. It's almost like an offering we would make to God, which is using both hands. And so there are these little practices, and the respect for individual perception was also something where people felt, oh, they're rude because if I took the cup of tea from the person handing over the tea, I'm also expected to take it with both hands. Now, if I'm not taught to do that, I'm going to be perceived as rude. So I think, of course, we are not, part of an entire journey, Mala. But what it told us is that there are these little things that matter as much as the big pieces. So it's, on the one hand, we may talk about what a great work opportunity the organization provides, but these little things which make for engagement, which makes for a person to feel at home.
Right. No, absolutely. Something small can make a big difference in terms of perception. So, in fact, now that you say this, how did how did you introduce all of this? So you're talking about the senior Indian leadership, understanding the Nepalese culture, and then making certain behavioral changes. Right? So how was this whole process? How was it introduced, and how was the buy-in? To what extent did the organization flex itself to to accommodate the national culture?
Yeah, so there was a very big intent to accommodate the national culture. So we actually did, workshops to get people to talk about what is Nepaliness. It's almost like building the brand essence. So there are steps to build the brand essence. What's the core? What's the essence? What defines us? If there was, what are the descriptors? What are the words? What are the language? What comes to mind? So the whole symbology, the whole, even the flag is a very unique flag. So there's a huge pride in what we stand for. There is a, how does one incorporate the, even small touch points. So I'll give you an example. Dasain is Dashera, which is really the 10 days of Navratri. Now, uh, for if, just to recognize that Dashain is actually bigger than Diwali in Nepal. It's
Right.
bigger, and it's actually a, it's a national holiday which goes on for a longer period of time. So I was very pleased to see when I saw on LinkedIn advertising, which was, or there was actually some wishing that had happened. There was a small little film that had come up, which all of which goes to say that this is, how change sticks by picking small opportunities to celebrate and to keep that thread going of genuine connect with what is happening in that culture. So it cannot be anything cosmetic. It has to work with little things that you incorporate. And of course, you need to have, like I said, there is genuine interest and intent uh, in the engagement and in the effort being made. And when I speak now, we've completed that engagement in 2019. We've been introduced to the new leadership. So there's a new MD. We've been introduced, and then COVID struck. So we've not been able to do any activity
Right.
since the beginning of the year, but the introductions have been made, and we've been in touch to find out. We've had a few conversations on, just for us to check in to see how are things, what's
Right.
happening, more at at the level of just conversing, or even for us to reach out and find out how things are there. If there is something which is like a national calamity, you kind of get engaged, and you get involved, and you
Absolutely.
interact with people. So even as a consultant, even though we are not actively on a project, Mala, you are sort of in touch on what's happening and keeping your finger sort of on the pulse. You won't have it exactly, but at least you've got your ear to the ground to know what's happening.
Right. All of this is a two-way and three-way process, and a continuous, what should I say, work in progress. And I'm sure that with new leadership team coming, the whole thing has to be, started all over again. And, the mutual
Yes.
respect and the bonds have to continue to be
No.
built on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, and what we've noticed is that you have some wins, some things stick, some don't. The whole. We thought it was very powerful for us to work with teams and individuals with the Gallup strengths, because then you're coming from a space of potential, you're coming from a growth mindset, you're not coming from a place of judgment to say, oh, they're doing this, they always do this, so it kind of gives you a big canvas to explore potential. But we were a little disappointed that that piece didn't stick as much as we would have liked to. And I think part of it is also we coming away and not being able to work with it. And we've seen other client organizations where uh, it's we've had a chance to interact far more intensively on that, work much more closely with a lot more rigor, and then it's stuck. But over here, because there were many pieces that we were doing, the important and the urgent as the client saw it, which was some of the things that were bigger, that were broken, that needed to, like, better conversations, a little more transparency, a little less fear, a little more of bonding. All of that was given more importance, but the that individual to team piece, which is the strengths piece, didn't quite get the kind of attention that we would really would have liked to, because then change really begins at the individual level, and then it can stick. So even if you don't have that kind of intense working, Mala, that people will continue on that path much more. I'm not so confident right now. I think there'll be a lot more work to do. We might have to repeat a lot of activities which we needn't have had we made people, work on the path of working on themselves and their strengths more.
True. And I think when you come in as a consultant, there always will be some limitations of how far you can take that, So, but it's really interesting to know this. I don't know if anybody has any questions, but we could move on. I'm looking at the time at the second.
Mala, let me just, there is a question here.
Sure, okay.
And a comment. Colleen says, I so appreciate the concept of making space for cultural norms as a way to help participants feel at home. So that's the inclusion piece.
Right,
and we have KK Moradian asking a question. How many people work in the Nepali organization? The ratio of male, female, what sector of business are they in? Yeah. So Deepa, could you say something more about that?
So the groups of people that we were working with were smaller. So there is, there is factory, there is the office, there are the different functions. So there's the sales function, the marketing function, there's manufacturing and production, there's finance. So we worked across functions, and there would be the exact number of people in the organization, I have to check. There would be over 1,000 people working there, but the group that we worked with was smaller. We engaged with all in all about 100 people.
Okay, and there's any split between male and female sector of business? This is a question from KK. Are you able to, do you have a sense on that? It's okay if you are, because for confidentiality reasons, if you cannot disclose the sector part, because I know it's easy to connect the dots.
There are two more questions that have come up.
Yes. Shannon Sirur has a very interesting question, and that is, what are your opinions on the value of teaching similarities in culture as well as the differences?
That's a great question. That's a great question. I think, sometimes we, and I say this so many times, that we overemphasize the differences, and we oftentimes forget on what are some of the fundamentals that bind us and our humanity. So when we, for example, if you're making, there are some what we call motherhood, connects or connectors. So, for example, every parent wants the child to be safe, wants the child to receive an education so that they can go further than where the parent has been. And they will leave no stone unturned in providing for healthcare and providing for education for the child. Now, this is something which is so universal. Yeah, every, and there is a, the whole aspect of similarity is also what brands attempt to do. So I'll give you an example. If there is you know, the if you look at global brands, they probably make a very simple uh, connect, which is at some fundamental truth which connects with all of us at uh, uh, at a level of the human. So take the brand Dove. Now Dove today is talking about real women. Now the whole aspect of real women, the whole aspect of saying I do not have to apologize or pretend, or I do not have to worry if I have hair which is of a certain type, and I can just be real and authentic. Now this sits in with, first of all, the times that we live in. It sits with an overall uh, a space of where you want the needle to move as far as women and their self-acceptance and self-assurance and coming into their own, accepting themselves, being able to love themselves, which is really the first part of self-esteem. And how do you build that early on in a little girl, and then how do you reinforce that when, as she grows, when she's at her most vulnerable best, and how do you kind of keep at it as she grows through the life stages. And that's what a brand like Dove attempts to do, which is really talking about our similarities. And it celebrates the differences, but more the aspect of saying, I want to be able to accept myself the way I am, and I'm a real woman. And I think that's really the whole aspect, Shannon, of needing to talk about our similarities, because that's really where the numbers come. That's really where we get the power and the strength of how many of us are in, at a place together. And I think a lot of times that speaking up uh, is very important. I don't know whether I could I've answered your question, but that's really that whole space of humanity is what I mean about the similarities between us. I've had the opportunity to live and work in Jamaica and in the West Indies for 3 years, and that was again a passion space. And I just wanted, I wanted to live and experience the Caribbean. I had a certain a certain perception of what the Caribbean would be like, and working there, teaching at the university over there, working with possibly a most cosmopolitan, the most cosmopolitan, most how shall I say, ethnic mix and of peoples. Tells you that, you know, how similar we are. You know, we care for our kids, we want want the best for them.
Yes, no, that's really good. The Dove example, in fact, you have brands sometimes they have similar positioning across the whole region. For example, Southeast Asia. There's another question before we move on to the next case study, and that is, where did his question? Okay, that's from Warsaw. And his question is, what about differences in religion between both countries or communities in this project? Did that play a role?
No, Nepal is, you know, a Hindu country, and the religion didn't play a role at all in this one.
Okay. I think now time to move on to the next case study. I know we could spend a little more time here, but we've promised people 2 case studies, so I want to, you know, see if we can move on to the next one, which is interestingly called Winning in Many Indias. And the fact that India is so diverse and culturally complex is, of course, you know, well known to everybody. But what does this mean for pan-Indian companies to succeed in India? how do they use these cultural insights to tailor their solutions to win in many different Indias? And this is talking about differences.
Yeah. So this project, Winning in Many Indias, is particularly close to my heart because even when I was in Jamaica and I would talk about India, there are some large motifs that people have, perceptions, elephants, snakes, and this was many 20 years ago. So those were still the questions. And it's really about trying to decode. So when international companies want to come to India, and I've seen some presentations about doing business in India, which again come from a place of generalization. It's also it's important to understand the nuances, but it's also important not to be it's not stereotypical. So what we over here, what one of the assignments that we had with the client, almost each year there was a kind of a it was like a like an exhibition to showcase the different states of the country as well as the neighboring countries, so India as well as South Asia. And we had worked on these assignments for a period of time. And this time the ask was a little different, and they said, can you bring these uh, the client, the organization had moved away from just typically representing the states by creating state clusters. So India has 26 states, and these states had been clustered depending upon a certain cohesive unit. And these five clusters, they wanted us to bring alive via film, and they wanted us to create a 2D film. And we went about this in a certain way, and the end point, or who is really going to be watching these or understanding these, it's part of their global teams who get an appreciation for the many facets of India, and even for within, to get a better understanding of what's really the mindsets, the attitudes, the behavioral differences, and the context. And they asked us to prepare these, to bring this alive in a sense. So what we did was, our job was, we had to meet people. We conducted these in-depth interviews, observations. We spent a day with them in 5 cities, as well as some semi-rural areas close to city limits. We did the audio and video capture of the context. And I'm going to show you 2 cities for now. I'm going to show you Mumbai, and I'm going to show you Kolkata. For those of you who know India, and there are many of you who are from India, we are a kind of a melting pot of language. We have, I think, 26 languages, many religions. We also have a saying that for every 12 miles, the dialect changes. And I had a funny experience, which I must share with you. 3 weeks ago, we had a house guest who was from South India. He'd come from Chennai, and he's an Andhraite. He 84-year-old. He's the grandfather of our daughter-in-law to be, and he speaks Tamil, and he speaks Telugu. And we also have home help who's from Nepal, and Shambhu asked me, he said, Madam, Grandpa has come from India, hasn't he? Then how come he doesn't speak Hindi? He's Indian and he doesn't speak Hindi. So the whole perception that if you are Indian, you can speak Hindi itself is a myth, because there are 5 South Indian states where people don't know Hindi. And it's also important to understand these differences, because India is really many Indias, and that's what we wanted everybody to understand. So in these years, of understanding people. We've had the opportunity to work across many categories. So we've done whether it was food and trying to understand culinary differences in kitchens, to understand protein consumption at the lower ends, and how people in different clusters eat. We've had the opportunity to understand, even washing habits. Again, what are the cultural sort of things, the do's and don'ts on why people will do certain things. And it's really about understanding the diversity of these markets and bringing them alive. Again, there's a difference in gender, in how women, the kind of freedom they have, education access, employment. So it was an interesting ask to put this together and to create a film context, because that itself was a unique opportunity for us to express and to bring this alive. Bring the city, or bring the cluster alive. And if you saw this, and maybe you'll get a chance to see it again, it's worth a second viewing. The film starts with a sound, a beat, and it's almost like it's called a tutari, and it's like a bugle, and it's the challenge of the city is every day. It's like going into battle, because it's not an easy city. If anybody takes the local trains, just to get onto the train and to reach a place of work and to get home back safely is again triumph. And that's why the battle cry. And we call it the city of aspirations, the city of dreams, because half the city is made up of migrants, people who've come here to make a life, to make a living, who often have families away. As you know, it's also the home to the largest slum, with 50% of the city living in slums. Dharavi is the largest slum in the world. But
yes, we have a comment from Mithun Mrida who says, if you can survive Mumbai, you'll survive anywhere. That I think so true.
And there is this, absolutely, and there is this whole can do, never give up, never say die spirit, that people talk about, the Mumbai spirit. Whether come rain, come shine, people will get up and go to work. So you heard that in the audio where this consumer, this lady actually says that, if you lose, if for the money gone can be earned, but for time gone can never be earned. So the Mumbaikar is almost epitomized by the value they put to time, or making the most of their time. If you have seen the local trains, the women are multitasking, they are talking, they are, chopping their vegetables, or keeping things ready for what they'll go and cook. There's this whole buzz of industry. So we had an opportunity to create an experience for students out of I think it was Erasmus University, and they were here many years ago, and they wanted to understand entrepreneurship. So they were on a 9-day trip, and 2 days were hosted by us, where we gave them a glimpse of entrepreneurship in Dharavi. And we also gave them an exposure to the more affluent and the more aspiring parts of the city, by giving them exposures to newer India, which is really the malls. As you know, Mumbai has moved from being a city of mills to a city of malls. Totally. And today it has one of the largest malls, because those were sprawling mills, and the mills moved out of the city. So yes, this is about a progressive mindset. We saw it's a fast-paced life, aware, confident. There is a need for convenience. There is a willingness to pay a price for convenience. Celebration is again important. There is this positive mindset, again a mindset to save, because remember, it's the eye on prize. What will I do with this for the future of my family? Again, nuclear families, and versus joint families. So more than 60% of the families are nuclear, and where there's a lot.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, complete what you were saying.
Yeah, so I'm saying that itself gives you a lot more freedom and independence. Tell me.
Yes. No, I was very interested to know that how this information or insights into Mumbai was used to, craft or tailor a business solution specific to this audience. Do you have any example to share of that?
So this is an ongoing activity. So this kind of an immersion, this kind of bringing the consumer alive is an ongoing exercise done by this extremely customer-centric, consumer-centric client. So it's
Okay.
like a refresh. It's like every year you kind of go and try and see whether there is some more nuance, there is some understanding, is there something that's emerging. So this whole continuous sort of people watching that happens. The expression here was film, which is what we brought alive. And what we'll do for the purpose of this audience is to also contrast it with, give you a glimpse of Kolkata, which is this, like Mumbai is the city of dreams, Calcutta, the city of joy, or living in the now. So we will see that later.
Great. There's...
So I don't know, from on the time front, I think I'm going to just quickly run through this, but you saw that there is, these are some vignettes of the city and whether it's purchase behavior. So we just brought some slice of life examples. So we talked about how people buy, what's the kind of decision making, if I make a certain pack size choice and I'm looking to make it last for a period of time, how husband and wife both get together to make decisions, but the man will possibly have the final say, how there's a huge amount of dependence on word of mouth. Today there's a lot more digital payments which have become the norm, especially now. The last 1 year, India probably has the highest number of digital transactions made per day. And
yes.
Again,
and certainly we have had 2 instances where demonetization before and now with COVID, the whole acceleration has taken place. These two have been the turning points to increase the digital consumption.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Mala, today credit card, debit cards are no longer, I mean, everybody is doing Google Pay and UPS and Phone Pay, and, just until a couple of months ago, even a credit card or a debit card was the norm. But with Paytm post demonetization, maybe in the last 1 and 2 years, everything has just increasingly moved digitally. Again, good access to internet, education, infrastructure, water supply, soft water, good quality lake water. Again,
yes.
Food and nutrition. So we kind of, put this together just as an infographic to show what it is. And I'm quickly going to share and tell you a little bit about what were some of the contrasts, or what you already picked up the mood, a little more slow-paced, more intellectual mindset, great importance given to education and cultural accomplishments. There is this whole notion of Shonar Bangla, which is, the pride in the regional identity, lots of love for the language, political opinions. So if, far more left leanings as opposed to the West being, more right leanings. Festivals like Durga Puja, again, about celebration with family, with community, a lot of sharing. Food, again, a huge importance given to food. So I'm quickly going to take this forward. Access, a lot of time spent in cooking, a lot of elaborate meals, a lot more protein, fish, meat, red meat, a lot of experimentation, exploration. We have seen rice and fish being the staple, clothing. So, basically we brought this alive. And then there were, of course, the other films. So we made one for the North, for the South, and one for Central India. And very quickly, this was primarily to, bring that perspective, or give the audience a flavor, which is really the managers, a sense of the country, even global managers, people visiting, visitors, overseas visitors to the country, again, having this as a context setting.
Right. Wonderful, Deepa. I've lived and worked in both these cities. So I have lived these differences, and especially the pace of life and the general, what should I say, the Bengali pride in their culture, in their food, in their arts, language, music. I've seen all of that. And the fervor of the festivals. Having spent some time in advertising, I know that, during the festival seasons, the advertisers would trip over each other to create special ads to cash in on Durga Puja, Kali Puja.
40% of brand sales happen in those 10 days.
Yes.
Mala. And the other part, which is interesting, is because in the East, there's daylight by 4 o'clock in the morning. And if you had daylight saving time and you had workplaces and schools starting much earlier, I guess people would be far more productive. Otherwise, by the time, it's almost noon from the body clock. It's almost noon by the time the child is ready to go to school or to work. So,
yes, and Calcutta has much more distinct seasons as compared to, Mumbai, the winter and the summer and all of that. So, marketing to across India, pan-India, is definitely a very, very complex task. And even something as just arriving at a brand name and positioning and a message can be really very, very complex. Complex. And sometimes what happens, copywriters write their copy in English, and the regional language translators are struggling to put across the same idea in the regional language. And that's really one very, complex part of the diversity when you're selling across India.
Mala, shall we open up to Q&A, members of the audience?
Yeah. Absolutely. I have already looking at the Q&A. If there's somebody who would like to unmute themselves, please feel free to do that. I think we have a few minutes. And then, we have 3 minutes before we then share the survey and close the program. So Colleen says, many thanks for this engaging presentation and conversation. I look forward to the history lesson. Okay.
So any questions that we have at this point?
Just feel free to unmute yourself. Your Calcutta film has reminded a few people of the lovely Bengali sweets.
In fact, I miss talking about the sweets. So I'm happy to have seen those because I absolutely love Bengali sweets.
Yes, I know that you can take a person out of Calcutta, but you can't take Calcutta out of the person. And I still call it Calcutta because that's what it was called when I grew up there.
Like Bombay for us.
Yeah, I changed to Mumbai because I was living in Singapore at that time, and the expatriate crowd immediately changed to Mumbai. So I had no option. I couldn't hang on to Bombay anymore.
I have a question.
Okay, Bonsoir, go ahead.
Yeah, did I hear correctly, or is it just a dream that the next SIETAR India Congress will be at Calcutta sometime? It's just, I think you announced that in Pune. They were, I think you even gave a date or something. So maybe you forgot that. So I'm looking forward to going to Calcutta, sure.
Yeah. So also, instead of your direct Dutch style from Netherlands, you're using an indirect style to plant the idea into our heads.
Yeah. But Mala, we do have some SIETAR India members in Calcutta who were...
Yes, we do.
Yes. So Vincent, we will work on that one. Yeah.
I'll second that because I'll go back to Calcutta anytime. Okay, so I don't see too many.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I have a sorry. I have a question for. Thank you. Deepa, in the context of there's something called cultural marketing, and then there is there is consumer behavior and market research. I'm guessing there are certain brands which are like larger than life, which is, for example, in the context of Indian brand, which is like Raymond's or a whiskey brand or something like that. Is the consumer insight a separate piece, and how would you link that to culture? Because those brands become become lifestyle. It's more than just a usage. It's about an identity, and therefore, what are your words, or what is your takeaway on culture leading brands in the context of advertising?
So, Minal, I think culture will always be the backdrop. It's really what provides a context. It's also what gives, it's really the mosaic or the fabric of the story. It's where something is going to sit. So it becomes an integral part of understanding the life, understanding the.
Oh, there's some disturbance. I don't know from where it is coming.
So, Minal, whether every brand, irrespective of what it is, it has to sit within the consumer's life context, and that life context is embedded within an overlay of the culture. So I cannot separate one from the other, and the brand insight, which is again rooted to where is the space, or where is the relevance for something like that to sit in the consumer's context. So I do not see these as separate. I actually see this as one contiguous amalgam of making sense, and in that sense making, what culture gives you is a reference point, and it's a way to get to it. So the many layers. So if I have to go to reach the values and the ethos, I have to go through how people live, what they wear, who are their heroes, what are their stories, what are their myths, what kind of how do they speak the language, yeah, what do they celebrate, what do they mourn, and then and then the brand is a person, and that person again lives in the same context.
There's a suggestion from Reggie Minal for a book for you. Raphael Clotaires on decoding culture.
Yes, so it's called The Culture Code. It's a beautiful book, Minal. I would strongly second that. Thank you. Raphael Clotaires' book is a must read.
Shannon had a question just at the same time that Minal did. So Shannon, sorry, would you like to unmute yourself? I know that those who would like to get off the call can just use the Survey Monkey link that Jill has shared, and I know we are past the time. Those who want to hang on for a little bit more, we can go on. Shannon, go ahead.
Actually, it was an observation that keeps repeating itself over and over and over again the longer I stay in India and kind of root myself in the culture. Food is such an ingrained, wonderfully crazy way of experiencing Indian culture, and it is so like I was going to say, it was so ingrained in the culture that you really can't. There's no way to escape it.
So true.
U.S. culture, though we have, in each state, in each region, there's specialties, that we can say, no, this is definitely Southern cooking, this is definitely Northern cooking, this is definitely, but I think as Americans, we have forgotten to slow down and actually cook food from scratch. And so I actually learned how to cook from scratch here in India through my mother-in-law. I grew up in the 80s, so my mother went from being in the kitchen when I was really young in the 70s to moving to having a career and being very active and divorced and all of those things. So there was no time. I was a latchkey kid along with my sister, so there was no time to really learn how to cook. I admittedly was not that great, but I've gotten back to understanding what good food is, and what the difference was between what I thought was cooking and what is actually cooking.
Yes.
So yeah, please go ahead.
No, in India, there's so much tradition and history around food. And even, for example, in Kolkata, I find that much more in Kolkata than as compared to Mumbai. You know, the order in which the meals have to be eaten, the occasion, the dishes which go with certain occasions, they will not make it on any other occasion. Yeah. So all of that is a lot. And I'll just give you a little, a little insight comes to mind that when the canned and Tetra Pak juices were going to be launched in India, they had a tough time thinking, how are they going to get the Indian housewife to take on something which is so ready? Because the housewife felt that unless she squeezes the juice and takes it out for her kids, it doesn't have the nutritional value. So, you know, things like Tetra Pak juices, Kellogg's cornflakes took a long time to get into the market to make this mindset shift that, you know, cooking does not need to have to be hard work.
Right. Right. And take so long. No, and let me be clear. We, you know, the U.S. definitely has their traditions. You know, July 4th has its crazy traditions. Christmas time, any holiday, you know, has its food traditions, and are marked by that. And we share with the neighbors and close friends and family. We get, see, that's that common thread that Deepa was talking about, that humanity, that all holidays are surrounded by people and food and family. And whether it's a Christmas cookie or it's some kind of lefse from, you know, the Norwegian section of people, it's you know, whatever it is, it's still that common thread, and that is what kind of equalizes everybody. And like Jill was saying in the comment section, you know, this COVID thing has really kind of leveled the playing field quite a bit for everybody. You know, all of a sudden we all look the same, and we all are struggling with this. So
yes, we all have a central character in our lives now.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Everybody's lives are revolving around the world. Sorry, Jill, you have your hand up. Maybe we can just squeeze in one quick comment or question before we close for the evening.
Yeah, I have been mulling over something in my mind since I saw the Mumbai video, because there you saw a contrast between a more upwardly mobile, middle-class woman in a house, and then you also contrasted it with the woman who was more traditional in her cooking style and lifestyle and living in a joint family. So I was just thinking, and it's related to what you said as well, Shannon, because in the last 16 years in living here, I've seen a shift towards what the US was or is maybe in the 80s, and the quick convenience of things and not cooking from scratch and walking into a shop like Big Bazaar or like any of those ones I mentioned and having ready-made masalas, which normally would have been made from scratch. And I'm not making a negative judgment, it's just an observation, you know, that there is this shift and there is this change. If anything, when it comes to the women empowerment piece, I would be happy that women have more opportunity to spend time doing other things. At the same time, I'm just thinking that, I guess my question is, are the brands, are the companies you're working with, are we looking to convert all of our steel to plastic as quickly as we can because we can, you know, consume? Or do you see more brands coming out as well, looking at how can we balance the traditional aspects of culture and basically lessons that you can learn from an Indian kitchen on conservation, less wastage, more wholesome foods and other things like that, but at the same time maybe also include a little bit of that convenience factor? Yes. I don't know if this is a straight question, but I was just curious, like, can we balance it instead of maybe going all the way to where the US is and now dealing with a massive problem with obesity or whatever it might be, you know?
Yeah. No, it's a very interesting question, Jill, and I'll take it in two parts. One is we've been working very closely in this whole aspect of food and culinary evolution of women right from I think 2006. So it's 14 years of intense work that we've done over the years, seeing and been part of a lot of brands, successes, failures, a lot of attempts, startups. We also did a very interesting piece around the whole theme of nostalgia, which was a large project to understand what are the recipes over the world that in the country that women miss. What grandma made, which she has a strong attachment. And it was work that we were doing for a startup. We're part of a food innovation ecosystem out of Bangalore, and this was really to try and identify what are those specific dishes. And we worked with a food technologist and an entrepreneur who was a restaurateur turned brand person. And the intent was to pick up 2 or 3 mega recipes from each state, and which are classics, grandma's recipes, and to put it in a way where you could use your own meats, your own vegetables, and the seasoning comes in this, and it's available now, in the market, just launched a couple of months ago. But what I see is the Indian consumer has outright said no to something that is ready to cook, but they are ready to eat, but they have embraced brands which are in the ready to cook space. So the Indian woman still wants to explore. She wants to use her own veggies. She wants to make her own twist, which could be something which is her signature style. So there's a element of creativity, but a lot of the drudgery is what the brands are looking to remove out of the consumer's life, and sort of say that this young lady, girl today who's a 14-year-old, or a boy today who's 14-year-old, because a lot of cookery shows have suddenly removed the whole gender bias, and I'm very happy to say that you have a lot of young boys and men, and that's a space that I love to explore, Jill, which is, what are these early trends that one can spot, and we nudge brands to say, let's go and explore this cohort. Let's go and see what's happening to men in the kitchen. And now we did some work during COVID to see how people were using their times and what is it that they are doing. So I don't think we're going to go all the way to embracing that. And there's a good sort of a whole comeback back to roots of scratch cooking, which is also very popular. And there's a lot of traditional recipes. So I think taking convenience and help in small measures, exploring myself, being able to pull back, exploring other regional foods. So there's a lot of exploration of, Vatal Columbus, or specific southern dishes to, dishes which are from the east. And because Indians have started traveling so much, Jill, in the last few years, there's a lot more exploration that has started. Whether it is with the side dishes, with ingredients, with Western influences, you see that even more. So food remains a big part of passion and exploration and, the cultural discovery.
I think what Jill has shared, that MasterChef is so popular here. Yeah, absolutely. I think MasterChef has really revolutionized the whole, about cooking and, the idea about all the Western ingredients and the fusion cooking, all of that, and cooking as a science. All of that has been
introduced. So Sanjeev Kapoor, you'd be happy to know, you'd be surprised to know, Sanjeev Kapoor, this master chef, is more than 1,000 crore brand today. That's the kind of, his enterprise is over 1,000 crores.
He was very fortunate to be an early entrant in this field, and he has therefore got the advantages of that. Yes, yes. Absolutely, absolutely. Oh, wow. I think we are reached 10 o'clock.
10 p.m. in India. 10 p.m.
10 p.m. in India is not too late, but still.
Well, it's normally midnight for me. I just want to say, Deepa, no question. I just want to say I loved both your videos. for the fact that they presented the essence of these clusters. I'm also one that's traveled a little bit in India. So you've presented the essence of the clusters in such a neutral fashion. You know, what Jill said about not drawing judgment about each of these clusters, that's what I loved about both the videos, because it's bringing out the essence and yet keeping it respectful. So really, really good job done with that.
Thank you. Thanks to my team. I do that on behalf of my wonderful team who's really put all this together.
That's a wonderful note to end on. So I will thank you so much, Deepa, but I will leave Sunita to do the formal vote of thanks. And
thank you so much, Deepa, for a really engaging conversation, both Deepa and Mala. We really experimented with another format this time. We wanted to have a conversation, just not a presentation. I think it's really nice. It feels like a chat between friends. And therefore, really thank you so much, everybody, for taking out the time and having this wonderful discussion. We are, as Jill mentioned, we are going to be having a bonus webinar, SIETAR India, and that will be in the month of December. Watch out. It's going to be on history and how history has shaped our mindset. So it's going to be really very interesting and innovative. And with that, I will say Happy Diwali to everybody.
Happy Diwali.
Happy Diwali.
Happy Diwali, everybody. I hope you get a chance to have some fun in a safe way.
Yes. And thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye for now.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot for this opportunity, and be safe.
Yes. And it's great to see our friends from Paris and from Netherlands and from everywhere else in the world, honestly.
Yes, absolutely. It's a real treat for us.
And thank you, Minal. Minal was the one who introduced me to Mala and to SIETAR, so thank you. And it's very late in Singapore for you as well.
Yes, and we also had a participant, a couple of them from Japan. So I hope that we provided you enough value to stay up so late.
Yes, I think Mala did an awesome job of moderation. Yeah.
Oh.
I'm going to exit and say
yes, I think that we can disconnect our calls and good
Bye-bye.
night.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you.
To those who are going to sleep after this.
Thanks.